so Time Magazine names its Person of the Year as journalist. Once again proving that they don't have the slightest clue what the word person means because they chose plural journalists, whom they refer to as the guardians of truth. Oh yes, so many of these journalists care about the truth so much. So plural journalists are the singular Person of the Year for Time Magazine. Not sure how that works. But you know, they did this last year when they chose the Me Too gals as the Person of the Year. That's not a person, guys. That's several people, you morons. I mean, I'm surprised if they're gonna pick a bunch of people that it wasn't these guys. You know, the NPCs, because they're so brave, they are telling you the truth because we say it's the truth. Well, you mentioned the truth, because I don't see Laura Loomer's award for speaking the truth about Sharia and anti-Semitism. No, Laura Loomer is blacklisted for that. Certainly, she's not gracing the cover of Time Magazine, because for them, it's only the NPC truth that gets the award. And of course, this year, Muslim Brotherhood superstar Jamal Khashoggi was one of those guardians they chose. Yes, he's Person of the Year because he was killed. And don't tell me that's not the case, because would anyone know who he was if he wasn't killed, aside from, of course, the jihadis he was trying to corral? The real reason these people are the Person of the Year is because Time Magazine wants to tie people who are actually experiencing journalistic oppression to Donald Trump. It is lazy, it is dumb, and why not just make Trump the Person of the Year? I mean, after all, we all know he's the actual Person of the Year. He's on all these people's minds, and if the article's about him anyway, then why not just give him the award again? Yeah, he's all these people, he lives rent-free in their heads. He's mentioned more times in the article than one of their actual Person of the Year, Jamal Khashoggi. This is an article that has nothing to do with journalists. This is an article that is about Trump and Time Magazine's identity crisis. All right, real talk. Why do we care what Time Magazine has to say? I mean, when's the last time you picked up a copy of Time Magazine, let alone gave a crap about what their writers in it had to say? They used to be a big deal back when, you had the media gatekeepers deciding what is worth your time and what isn't. But now, of course, they are not. But somehow we play this game where we pretend their Person of the Year is still super important. Why? Because it gives the other legacy media a sense of importance. Look at who we have chosen for you to love this year. And as we mentioned, the entire article is an anti-Trump screed disguised as a tribute to journalists. I mean, the thing is written like a paper you wrote in high school, and it reads, quote, Trump's rhetoric has been embraced by leaders less restrained in their ability to tamp down on reporters. All right, can someone tell me how Trump has clamped down on reporters other than, of course, criticizing fake, lying stories in the absolutely harsh terms that they deserve? I mean, he banned Jim Acosta from the White House for a couple of days. Yeah, but it took an actual physical altercation to get to that place. Years of rudeness, years of shouting, and a flood of fake news still were not enough to get the guy banned, and temporarily banned. But Trump is not spying on journalists like Obama did. Oh, and also spying on journalists' parents and their colleagues. Trump is not seizing the home, work, and mobile phone records of journalists at the Associated Press, because Obama frequently banned news photographers from official events, and Michelle Obama flew around the world and often banned press from her airplane. The Obama administration posted the worst record in history for fulfilling requests for public records under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. And yet, in 2008 and 2012, Time Magazine named Obama as Person of the Year. Yes, they did it twice. So in case you thought that they didn't pick Trump because they already did it and they didn't want to do the same person twice, not the case. Because case in point, Barack Hussein Obama. And by the way, they also gave it to Stalin twice, just as an FYI. But if the powerless journalists are so important to Time Magazine, then why did they go with Obama instead of, say, James Rosen, who Obama spied on? Because back then, the answer is, the media wasn't interested in honoring the guardians of truth. They weren't interested in they were only interested, I should say, in deifying the anointed one, Barack Hussein Obama. Back then, it wasn't authoritarian when he trampled on the freedom of the press and when he trampled all over the Constitution. But now, of course, Time Magazine says these journalists, their independence marks the distinction between tyranny and democracy. And of course, they mean Trump is the tyrant. And they write, in a world where budding authoritarians, meaning Trump is a budding authoritarian, have advanced by blurring the difference, there was a clarity in the spectacle of a tyrant's fury visited upon a man armed with only a pen. Let me wipe the tears from my eyes. And it's interesting because I recall the tyrant Obama also threatening to use a pen to blur the difference between tyranny and democracy. Okay, but sorry folks, it wasn't just his pen. He also threatened to use his telephone. Ring, ring. Now, to show you how absurd this comparison of Trump's treatment of the media to authoritarian treatment of the media is, let me read you this gem from the Time magazine article. Bangladeshi photographer Shahidul Alam was jailed for more than 100 days for making false and provocative statements after criticizing Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in an interview about mass protests in Dhaka. Now, of course, that's not to be confused with the Dhaka that grants amnesty to a bunch of entitled illegals. Just want to set the record straight there. Now, in Turkey, which has become the media's new favorite country because even though, they kill their own people, they also fed them the Khashoggi story, and without that, Time magazine wouldn't have a person/guardian/whatever of the year. In Turkey, journalists face 15-year prison terms. That's what they do in Turkey. It's a very different story over there. Now, how many journalists do we imprison here in the United States? The answer is none. Even Obama, despite his disdain for journalists, didn't throw them in the slammer. Unless they, of course, made a YouTube video that he could blame Benghazi on. Besides that, we don't kill, we don't imprison our journalists. On the other hand, they do that in Turkey. Now, here in the United States, 4 people were killed at the Capitol Gazette, if you guys remember that. But that was by a freaking psychopath, not by the government. And 2 were killed by the weather. They go out, they go to chase a storm, they get crushed by a tree. So in total, that's 6 people killed, 6 journalists killed here in the United States. And so what does that do? That gave the bright writers at Time magazine the fabulous idea to compare us to countries where journalists are killed for covering corruption, like they are in India and Mexico, or where they are killed by suicide bombers like in Afghanistan, or where they are killed by artillery fire in war zones like in Yemen. They compare the 6 people killed here to that. It's a ridiculous comparison and a pathetic attempt at trying to smear Trump as a murderous despot. But they don't even get their facts right, which is what drives me nuts. They say we're tied with Mexico, really, because in Mexico, they killed 7 people. Now, I'm no Einstein, but 6 is less than 7. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. The unfortunate fact is that in hellholes all over the world, there are journalists working their butts off to shed light on the horrible things going on, and sometimes they are killed in the process. Jamal Khashoggi, though, was not one of those intrepid journalists. But since Khashoggi was an Islamist radical who worked at the Washington Post, we de-emphasize the journalists who actually deserve our praise and give him and others like him special treatment. They write the stout man, which, by the way, is just a euphemism for being a fatty. Stout man with the gray goatee and the gentle demeanor dared to disagree with his country's government. He told the world the truth about his brutality toward those who would speak out, and he was murdered for it. Yeah, this guy was so gentle that he hoped Israel would violently die by force at the hands of Hamas, who I'm surprised Hamas didn't also get the Person of the Year award. I mean, while we're at it, while we're in the business of naming people who absolutely do not deserve Person of the Year but get it anyway, why don't I throw some names into the mix here? Why not give it to Hamas for their social justice projects? Sure, it's, funding the families of jihadists, but tomato. Or maybe they should have given it to the Somali pirates for their industrious spirit. Oh, they work so hard. Let's give them the Person of the Year award. What about giving it to George Soros for exposing the non-existent anti-Semitism on the right? But every time a conservative tries to call him out for trying to destabilize democracies around the world, they're an anti-Semite. So give it to him for exposing it. And therefore, he apparently proves that anti-Semitism is alive and well in American conservatism. So give him the award. And if you don't want to give it to him, then maybe you should give it to Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. You can frame him as one of the few world leaders willing to stand up to the real dictators like Donald J. Trump. Or maybe you can give it to the illegal immigrants whose ingenuity got them over the border or through the slots, wherever the hell they got in, and you can just call them creative geniuses for figuring out how to get past our weak borders. Or maybe we can give it to Harvey Weinstein for being the poster boy for stranger danger. No, the real reason, and we all know it, that Time chose to pick the Guardians of Truth as their person of the year is because they are scared of what Trump represents. They are scared of him representing the draining of the swamp, because it's not just in government. The swamp is media too. Just as they spent the whole article warning that Trump is using social media to blur the truth, they have to remind you who you can trust. And it is, of course, the fine people of Time magazine. And they say it is the purveyors of fake stories and fake news who absolutely deserve the Person of the Year award. In 2018, journalists took note of what people said and of what people did. When those two things differed, they took note of that too. The year brought no great change in what they do or how they do it. What changed was how much it matters. Oh, A+ student for your fabulous English paper. So in other words, all this is journalists in a dying industry. I mean, again, when's the last time you went to a magazine stand and bought a Time magazine, or any magazine for that matter? These companies, these outlets are using their deathbed as a pulpit to preach about how they still matter. We're not going to let it happen.